Hi, I'm Jennifer Simmons with AIM, and welcome to the sixth video recap of the 2023 Indiana legislative session. Joining today are AIM CEO Matt Greller and AIM Government Affairs Director Jenna Bentley. And just because we're all getting a little punchy at this point in the session, I was going to have you guys wrap all your answers today. If you're not up for that, maybe we'll do something a little different. But first, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, rhyming's not my thing, but I'm happy to be
here. Rhyming. We can rhyme too. Rapping.
Okay. I'm out on either, but thanks for having us on.
No rapping. All right, fine. Well, then we'll do a little word association. So before, just to keep it a little light, because we've got some pretty heavy topics today. When I give you your word, just offer a little update. You don't have to stick to one word back. I'll let you give a few more words than that. But Jenna, you go first. Your word is deadlines.
Tuesday and Thursday are big deadlines.
You have to go more than that.
Tuesday is when the House committee deadline is. And so what that means is if a bill hasn't been heard in the House, at the committee level, it won't move forward in that current form. I always give the caveat that just because the language didn't move forward in a specific bill doesn't mean it's dead for the session. It could come back in different bills. But and then Thursday is the Senate committee deadline. So same thing, if a bill hasn't passed the Senate, then it won't move forward to the second half of session. And then you start to get into the second reading deadline for the House on Thursday, and then things wrap up early. That first week of March is when we get to the halfway point. So really, it's a good time for us to reassess what bills are moving, what's not, and just take an inventory of the issues we'll be working on during the second half.
Yeah, but it seems like it's coming up, but those are going to be some long days in there. Correct. And there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So, you're going to hear, I think, we're going to be talking a lot about important, timely issues. So the next 2 weeks will be a little hairy, I would say. Matt, your word or words, public health.
Big changes to the bill this week. In the Senate, the bill was heard and passed out of committee, but not without some major changes. I think everybody knows that the way the bill was introduced, it would have provided money to counties directly if they opted in through some local resolution processes. The change, though, now makes it more of a grant program where you essentially have to look to the state and apply each year for the funding. So the amount of funding hasn't changed yet, but the way in which it could be obtained will be, which makes it, I think, a little tougher for communities, and it's not as certain as amount of funding that would be received. So it'd be hard to, I think, put programming in place and things, hire people or whatever it might be without that knowledge that it's going to be there certainly year after year. So that's something I think we'll have to have some discussion on. And to Jenna's points earlier about the deadlines, it's important to remember we're not even to the halfway mark of the session yet. And a lot of these big issues are going to be decided in the last days, hours, and minutes of the legislative session. I suspect this will be one of them that will come down to the very last minute to see where we are. So maybe a little bit of a setback, but good that the bill is still moving through the process and anxious and eager to continue working with folks on it.
And just so everyone can look it up, that's Senate Bill 4.
It was heard in public health because there's a fiscal is recommitted to appropriations. So it'll be on second reading this upcoming week. And it will be interesting to see too, the House is presenting their final budget on Monday of next week. And so they have a funding mechanism in there as well. And right now, from what we've seen, the two don't reconcile. So as Matt said, this will be a long-term conversation on how public health is funded. So look for that update next week on where the House ultimately lands on it too.
All right. Jenna, next one, publication of notices.
Good news. That's my word association. So that's been one of AIM's longtime initiatives. We've made progress in recent sessions with, if a notice is required to be printed twice, you can print that second notice on your website. Representative Doug Miller has a bill 1438 that is scheduled for a hearing on Tuesday in his committee, Government and Regulatory Reform, that would allow all notices to be published online. I think there might be some conversation on where they're published. The introduced version of the bill would require them to be sent over to the state archives, but we've been having conversations about allowing locals the flexibility to publish them on their own websites. So I think that will be part of the sticking point in the conversation. But again, we'll have more updates on Tuesday on kind of that long time initiative of AIMS.
Great. Matt, last one, IU basketball.
Cautiously optimistic, despite our good friend Mayor Rod Robertson and his allegiance to Northwestern and all his social media bashing of Indiana University basketball the last few days. I think we're in a great spot. Looking forward to a strong close to the season and hopefully a long tournament run.
Yeah, I don't know. IU's Big Ten tournament track record, not good. Meanwhile, Ball State basketball is doing really well. Just FYI.
I don't even know if IUPUI still has a team. So,
all right. So much like last week, and as I mentioned earlier, we really need to hone in on two issues today. I want to ask you guys about TIF, of course, and residential property taxes, because there are some really important votes happening early next week. We've talked about both of these issues every week during the legislative session thus far. So I just want to encourage anyone watching that wants to learn more about these issues and the evolution through the session. If you're not aware, please go to the AIM website, aimindiana.org, and review those legislative summaries. You can find them in the terminal. It will get you up to speed on why we keep talking about residential property taxes and TIF and what's been happening thus far. That'll bring you up to speed on where we are today, because hopefully you'll want that foundation when reaching out to lawmakers. So there's a little bit of background, but Jenna, let's start with TIF, House Bill 1085. That's the bill carrying the language we're going to be referencing today. It's harmful to municipalities and their ability to manage economic development. Economic development is something really community specific, right? It's something municipal officials were hired to do. That's what voters expect them to do, among many other things. Because it was amended yesterday on second reading, could you just kind of bring us up to speed on what does the bill say now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as it passed out of Ways and Means, there was a 20% pass-through requirement, 10% to schools and 10% to public safety groups. Then yesterday on second reading, that specific provision was amended, and now it eliminates the pass-through for public safety groups, but still keeps a smaller pass-through for schools, so that there is still that requirement, but they use a formula as opposed to based on the school's tax rate, as opposed to just a general percentage. So while it did get reduced in terms of the overall amount, it's still problematic for the same reasons. You're taking a portion of dollars that are meant to be paying off bonds and putting it in infrastructure in TIF districts for schools. And so I still think it just opens that Pandora's box for underlying units. If it's schools, why not counties? Why not townships? Why not libraries? Which we've already started to see some chatter about. So that's kind of the main provision that we've had a lot of lengthy discussions with lawmakers about. Another big provision is it changes the makeup of both county and municipal RDCs. So a municipal RDC, you have 5 members. Current law allows the mayor to appoint 3 and the council to appoint 2. This would take away one of the mayor's appointments and allow the school corporation to decide who has that 5th appointment. So it would either be a school board member or just someone that they appoint to the RDC. And so that could be problematic, as it could just create different tensions, might lock in some different decisions. And so, as you alluded to, economic development is core to what mayors and councils are elected to do. So we would like to continue to be able to have the RDC in its current form. Then there's a couple of other provisions dealing with reporting. It would require additional reporting of expenditures. You'd have to have your plan for the year approved by the legislative body, and you can't deviate from that plan. So that gets problematic if you're going to need additional infrastructure, or sometimes it's hard knowing what the needs are going to be with these huge economic development projects, or even smaller ones if you're going to need additional capital. So that's a provision that seems small, but it's really significant to how these deals are done, especially on the front end. There's also additional DLGF reporting requirements, which was amended on the floor yesterday. That was offered by Representative Pryor. So just some mechanical things that could really delay or jeopardize certain projects related to TIF.
Oh, excellent.
Jennifer, I'd add just a couple comments, not on the merits or non-merit of the bill, I guess in our case, but you will likely see this bill pass out of the House next week. And we're going to be sending out an action alert and all those kinds of things to our membership. But it's important, I think, for our members to realize that when they talk to legislators and say things like, the bill's likely going to pass, or it's already out of committee, why am I just now hearing about this? Those are all common comments you'll get back from legislators. It's very important, I think, for us as this bill moves over to the Senate to show a good, strong set of no votes and comments at the mic during the debate on the bill, so that we have more leverage on the Senate side, which we think we do. So don't be discouraged, I guess, is my overall point to the membership, that if the bill does pass, that it automatically means it's going to be enacted into law. We're a long, long way from that happening. This is just another step in that process, and it's going to be really critical for folks to talk to their legislators over the weekend and early next week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know it can be discouraging when you see something sort of barreling down the tracks that's so harmful. And, I wouldn't call this bill like a freight train. So when I was in the hall, I don't know if they still do that, Jenna, but when a bill just had so much momentum, that was the reference. It was a freight train, so just get out of the way. And so legislators would just get out of the way. This is what everyone wants. It doesn't seem like that's where we are with this bill. It seems like you are hearing that there's some hesitancy. And I think with the amendment, we're seeing some hesitancy. But you're hearing things like, well, I'm going to keep it moving through the process. I have concerns, but it's going to go. Why is it important to send a message to the Senate via no votes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is the kind of number one issue tied with property taxes that we've been talking to legislators about this week. And it is a lot of comments like that. But if they see this pass, along party lines or unanimously on the Senate side, it may not give them the cover they need to either not hear the bill or not move the bill. And ultimately, I alluded to it with deadlines, but just because a bill doesn't move in some form or fashion, say maybe the Senate doesn't take up this bill, there's language that can be pieced out and parsed out and added to other bills. And so that's why even with our conversations with the House, we're not letting up. We're meeting with as many House members as we can on the bill, so they know the implications of every provision that's in that bill in case it makes a reappearance. And so that's why it's just really critical that leaders on the Senate side see that this was a tough fight in the House, and then even members of the House recognize, hey, if this issue comes back, it's still a really big deal, and we're gonna work this to the end of the process.
All right, let's shift gears and talk quickly about another issue: residential property taxes. This is still very much a priority in the House, as evidenced by House Bill 1499. Jenna, there's some updates on House Bill 1499 to pass along. How does the bill stand after second reading in the House?
Yeah, there was one amendment offered by Representative Thompson that passed yesterday that deals with the homestead and supplemental deduction. So during Ways and Means, after it was significantly amended, there was a lot of chatter, especially by members of the Democrat House caucus, about how they're creating an increase to the deduction for the supplemental, but not for the standard deduction. And so they wanted to see an increase to the standard, so it helps out some of those lower priced homes and those homeowners. So that was what was amended into second reading yesterday. But other than that, it's the same version that passed out of House Ways and Means earlier in the process.
Matt, what's that mean for AIM members? So does this mean it's less important to engage on 1499, or is it still just as important because it's precedent setting of taking such a big source of revenue and reducing it without any other options for locals?
You know, like we've said before, the system that the legislature put in place 15 years ago is working. You know, we have the caps in place. We have levy growth limitations. So when you're in a situation like this where you are seeing a spike in assessments, it's never going to get completely out of control because of those guardrails the legislature already has in place. So I think that's the first important point to remember. So additional response is unwarranted, I think, in our opinion. You know, we were just talking to a leading economist yesterday who was talking about this phenomenon of remote workers, which I don't think is a phenomenon anymore. I think it's just a way of life here moving forward. Yeah, but he indicated there are over 1 million remote workers already in Indiana, and it's clear that they're choosing, you know, where to live based on quality of place investments that communities have made. And when you erode property tax, the property tax base any further, it just makes it all that more difficult to make those investments and attract the people that we need for Indiana to be successful. So in my opinion, that's the message. You know, that's a vital component to building a quality community. And without that, we don't have the people. And without that, we don't have a thriving economy in Indiana. So that's the message I think we want to share with legislators as this process moves along. It is better, but a better worse bill is a better bad bill is still not a good bill. I guess is what I'm trying to say, and I think that's something that the membership needs to convey.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's still a lot of work to do there. It's a long session, as we've said many times. So don't panic, but engage, I think is kind of our tenor right now. And I do feel like that's coming up earlier in the session than normal. I know there's usually something that we are frustrated about in the House or the Senate as it moves over to the second half. This feels more urgent and more sort of, I guess I would say, more alarmed than we have been in the second half or in the first half for a while, but still reminding ourselves and everyone else there's a long way to go.
Yeah, I think there is. And I think you also have to remember that oftentimes one house will pass a bill that the other house doesn't like or the other chamber doesn't like, and vice versa. And they're just setting themselves up for the end of session negotiations. So the key is to weigh in aggressively on key points throughout the process, so you have a place at the table when those final negotiations begin to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to quickly add to Matt's point about the overall message, I think that's the most helpful thing to focus on is a broad message, because even as we've been meeting with so many members of the House Republicans this week about TIF and property taxes, there's just a recognition that 1499 isn't going to be the final product. And so we need to make sure that whatever the House is ultimately pushing and figuring out where the Senate is, the Senate again has been more hesitant trying to even assess like what is going to be the result of tax bills this spring, that they have the bigger picture in mind. And then when there's final language on how this might land, that we can get into the mechanics of why it could or could not be problematic.
Right. Long way to go there. As Matt mentioned earlier, you should have received an action alert in your email inbox. And I guess by you, I'm talking to municipal members watching. We're asking them to do some really specific things to assist the legislative team, your legislative team at the State House, Jenna, So for any municipal leaders out there right now, it's important to check that email inbox, read that action alert so you can understand what steps would be helpful going forward. Those are urgent steps. So both bills we've discussed are going to be on second reading on Monday, right? Or I'm sorry, third reading on Monday, Jenna. So action now is important. If a member sees a legislator over the weekend, just give them the Cliff's Notes, Jenna. Like, what are those 3 things they need to say real quick if they've got 5 minutes?
Just asking them to vote no on House Bill 1085 and 1499 as well. With 1085 really focusing in on why TIF is the most important economic development tool that a municipality has. And when you start watering that down or making it unworkable, it's going to challenge really transformational projects. Mm-hmm. And so just kind of how the sausage is made, we know that legislators will likely have a robust debate on both of these topics before a vote on the floor. And so making sure they're equipped with how this could impact your a municipal member specific community before they have that conversation, likely Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Matt, from a grassroots standpoint and from an outreach standpoint, we say, like, in person, you talk to your legislator in person. If you can't do that, give them a call. If you can't do that, shoot them an email. But like the point is, get that communication out, right? If you don't have time to do those phone calls and those in-person meetings, an email is fine. So what's your advice when you're talking to folks that say, I'm so busy, I don't have time? Like, what do you say?
To legislators or members that don't have time?
Like municipal members, they're so busy.
Right.
Like, and so when they say, I don't have time, what's the minimum they can do?
I think the issue there is I've rarely run into a municipal official that would tell a constituent, I don't have time for your issue or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. I would say treat this the same way, because these issues are just as important as a constituent bringing a ruptured water main to your attention, or a problem with the storm sewer, or whatever it might be that's happening in a community. These issues have the potential to be as impactful or more impactful to a community. So I would urge you to take the time and do it. It's always best in person to talk to a legislator. It's much harder for them to give you an answer that you don't want to hear when it's in person. But any communication is certainly appropriate and encouraged.
Yep. And we try to make that easy for you. In that action alert I mentioned, you can, or AIM members can find at the bottom a way to get just the basic email address for your representative. So just click on that link, enter your address, and you can get an email for your representative and fire something off this weekend. So we try to make it as easy as possible. There are talking points in our action alert, everything you should need to be able to carry that message forward. So we'll wrap up there, unless Matt, Jenna, you have anything you want to add? We're good. All right, so my usual, as we wrap up, please get on and register for the AIM Legislative Dinner on March 8th here in Indianapolis. The governor will be there. We'll see the lieutenant governor and our keynote speaker, Catherine Laughlin. Also, please read the AIM Legislative Summary today. It'll give you some details on the deadlines that Jenna mentioned, as well as a couple of bill updates and the tracking list at the bottom for your reference on all the bills we're engaging with this session. Thanks, and we will see everyone next week.